So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the latest in series and podcast that we're doing on Guy Lafleur leading up to his national funeral on May 3rd. Now, today we're going to take a more serious approach as to why most Guy Lafleur fans believe that he was the luckiest person on the planet. Not only one of the most talented skaters in NHL history, he avoided death and other incidents in 1981 to live another 31 years, living the life that he wanted to live. Now, bear with me for a second. This is not a criticism of Lafleur, but it chronicles, I think, the worst year as a pro that Guy Lafleur ever had. We're talking about the various machinations of 1981. Now, we're quoting from an article on the great site Habs Eyes on the Prize, sort of like a blog story site that has got a lot of recognition over the years. Ironically, this story came out on my birthday in 2018. Now, the title of the article is Guy Lafleur in the 10-year contract, Part 4, Cheating, Death, and Taxes. Now, Lafleur's lifestyle almost ends up costing him his life, while the government ends up costing him where it hurts. Now, leading up to 1981, it was a very, very strange situation for Lafleur. He barely won the Cup in 1979. He tried to become a truly terrible disco album in which he gave hockey instruction set to the beat of the vibrant Montreal disco scene. Now, in 1979, he barely beat the Rangers, well, close to barely, in 5 games to win their 4th straight cup. 1980, he lost to the Stars in a terrible goalie tandem with Larocque and Hero. And 81, in the spring of 81, they lost to Edmonton in what was called the ascendance of the Gretzky era, which eventually led to them being in 5 straight cup finals, winning 4 straight. Now, around that era, early 80s, Lafleur became a frequent presence on the Montreal club scene and a late-night partying aficionado. The distraction that caused this did not please GM Irving Grundman, who in no shape or form should ever have been general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, and their relationship with his team superstar grew increasingly strained as Lafleur began exhibiting signs of frustration beyond his 10-year contract. The superstar player, who grew used to the adulation and title of the best player in the NHL, started taking a backseat to newcomers like Mike Bossy and Wayne Gretzky, and a lot of people believed as well Denis Savard. Now, it didn't stop Lafleur from living the high life in Montreal as he gripped tenaciously to his glory. Now, according to published reports and publishing of fact, he said he was partying with Robert Picard. I'm not sure exactly how much he was, or even that's true. I don't have final information on that, but that's what the press release said at the time. In March 81, while returning from a late-night escapade, Lafleur fell asleep behind the wheel of his rented Cadillac. The car veered off the highway, went through a chain-link fence, and a steel pole smashed through the windshield and embedded itself through the driver's seat of the car. Now, he was lucky not to be killed, you see by the photos here. Now, by some sort of divine intervention, Lafleur, who some say fell asleep at the wheel, only suffered a minor injuries to his ear, avoiding the serious injury or worse that the pole could have caused. Now, part of his ear was severed. Plastic surgery had to be conducted, and Larry Robinson said in a very famous comment, he's lucky to be alive. Now, it wasn't his first motor vehicle incident. 2 years prior, he was involved in a motorcycle accident. The team made him get rid of the motorcycle. At one point, he also had a Ferrari and a Corvette, and he lived off the ice literally very, very fast. Now, Grundman arrived at the hospital to visit Lafleur after his accident and gave some sage advice to the media that had come together, mostly reps from the Gazette. With all sincerity, I hope that Lafleur goes through this positively as a father, as a husband, and as a man. He's given a lot to the Montreal Canadiens, but it's of the man you have to think of first. It was hoped that Lafleur would forego his current lifestyle for a more substantial one. Now, that season, Lafleur missed 29 games during the campaign for various ailments, and the concern was that he was starting to slow down as the injuries piled up. Now, he played in the Canada Cup on the later that year, showed some signs of brilliance, but there was no indication he would ever reach the 50, 60 goal mark of previous years, a good 35 goal possibility. Now, Lafleur did make assurances that he would bounce back in the 82 campaign, but he also made some pretty direct remarks to the Canadiens organization. The Canadiens never keep players who lack discipline on their team, and if the managers of this team think that I fit in this category, they should not hesitate to trade me. It's not that I go out at night, that I live a life that's incompatible with my status as a hockey player. Now, the summer of '81 was filled again with trade rumors for the Montreal superstar, and certain behavioral traits continued. Now, the biggest rumor was literally he was going to be traded for Perreault straight up to Buffalo because Bowman was over there. Now, Montreal got a new head coach, which I think is the worst head coach in the history of the Montreal Canadiens, the ineffective Bob Berry, for that '82 campaign, who preached strict discipline, instituting a team-wide curfew among various initiatives. The first player to test that, of course, was Lafleur. He was fined $200 for missing a practice in September on the day of his 30th birthday. The long and short of it, that he missed practice and the matter is closed, said Berry. He's been fined by me. What went on between Guy and me is going to stay between Guy and me. I've got nothing to say about, said Lafleur when asked for his version of events in unusual lack of candor. Now, the war of words certainly did not die down that year. Lafleur came hard in defense of his friend, the very, very difficult but a very talented Pierre LaRouche, whose production had dropped year over year, but whose attitude on the team was certainly taking a turn for the worse. When Berry decided to pin LaRouche on the bench during a game, Lafleur accused Berry of being a puppet for Grundman, who was pulling the strings to make certain players look worse prior to the contract negotiations. Now, we all know LaRouche's famous cigar incident with Boom Boom Jeffrey-O, but LaRouche was a diva, literally. But he could back it up on the ice. But the thing is, just like Stéphane Richer, he needed to be motivated. LaRouche could get you 55, 60 goals, but at his worst, especially in the 79 season, I think he only had 8 or 12 goals and wasn't the Quebec star that he was 2 years pre or 2 years after. This is what Lafleur said. They have a trick to slowing down a player. I realized this over the past 2 years. They say I didn't play well because I wasn't in shape. If I played bad, it's because they didn't want to use me, said Lafleur to back up his thoughts. Grundman did not take it lightly being called out by Lafleur publicly. It would be false and dishonest to say things like that. We're saying things that are really not right, and we will take care of it. There are two ways of doing business, publicly like certain people like to do, or privately like I like to do. But we're going to sort out the case of Lafleur and LaRouche. When Lafleur comes to the support of LaRouche, especially the way he did, he's getting involved in things that did not concern him. But yes, it did, because LaRouche was on his line. He should concentrate on playing hockey. We chose a man to coach this team, and the man is not Lafleur. If everyone stuck to their own business, things would get quite better. That is for certain. Now, Lafleur was also becoming increasingly vocal about the work that Grundman was doing overall that season, saying that the GM was failing to address the need of a big forward to take the team to the next level. And he normally did this in these circumstances, and he gave the press an earful of his thoughts. I sounded this alarm last season, and the results proved me right. I noticed that nothing has been done to improve the team since then. It would be the addition of 2 rookies and a new coach. It takes a big player in every line, and in today's hockey, and we don't have one. Besides Bob Gainey, there are not a lot of solid forwards with us. On my line, I'm the biggest guy, so I have to go into the corners. Now we're behind by a year or two on other teams because he didn't make the necessary changes on time. It's been 3 years, and there should have been some trades that we should have put more faith in younger players like the rest of the teams in the league. We wanted to hold a team that won the Stanley Cup, but now we're paying for it. But boys, did he cull the herd just soon after. Even our last cup, we won it by the skin of our teeth, and it was at the time that changes should have been made. It's realized to look up the rafters at the Forum and see 22 Stanley Cup victories. I personally won 5, and I'm quite proud, but I want more. I want several more for the end of my career. Not a day went by on the road last year where the players didn't ask if the team made any moves. After our latest for change. Now, Grundman killed 2 birds with 1 stone December day in '81. Drunken outbursts in the team bus directed on several players, Berry and Grundman, calling him a simple bowling manager. Didn't say it was candlepin or duckpin. I haven't stop. LaRouche insisted, and that was the final straw that led Grundman to act. LaRouche was then traded to the Hartford for 3 draft picks. Grundman made a trade, as Lafleur was clamoring for, but almost out of spite. It was not a trade for a big forward at the cost of Lafleur's friend, but for several future assets. Now, in November '81, the Canadian government, under fiscal duress, put in place a tax reform that targeted rich sports contracts, among other things, as it would hit the Canadian players hard. Many would seek to renegotiate their contracts, including Rod Langway, who was later traded, Larry Robinson, and of course Lafleur. My contract at this point, Lafleur said. It's not impossible, however, that I'll have to pay the team's management a visit following these fiscal modifications. Like several other players, Ray-Jean Houle for instance, I have in my contract certain clauses under the previous tax shelters. We will have to revisit all of that contract, even after the contract that Bossy had signed. Bossy had signed a solid deal that would give him probably the best salary for a francophone player in the NHL. Now, the relationship between Grundman and Lafleur remained strained. After being eliminated by the Nordiques in the first round of the '82 postseason, Lafleur again took to the media to let his views be known. Grundman replied a day later via the press that Lafleur needs to watch what he says over the coming summer months, and that his focus should be to remain in shape like every other player and find satisfaction in simply doing his job as a hockey player. Now, as it went on, Grundman, and you're probably saying, who Mel Kiper, the famous contract. Now, it's under these conditions, a looming specter of an aging team in decline, financial uncertainty, and a very strained working relationship, that Lafleur would be headed for his fourth contract in negotiations. Now, when Lafleur eventually left the team, there's a podcast on my channel talking about that, had more to do with the malaise that was going on from the summer of 1980, when Wickenheiser was drafted, not taking Denny Savard, to the Grundman years, to Bob Berry coming in, Jacques Lemaire being disgruntled, Steve Shutt being disgruntled. See, Montreal at its best was a happy place to play. There was a lot of stress. But Bowman left, Lemaire left, Dryden left, Savard and Lapointe were injured or not playing to capacities before. Bob Gainey was becoming kind of the unofficial, captain of the team. I think one of the few, I don't know when the last time that Montreal had an Anglophone captain. So the media was on the back. The Quebec media was like crazy. And it was a disco era. You had the Islanders with a Francophone player leading the way, winning the cup. You had Wayne Gretzky going on. Lafleur's thing, he's being usurped as the top Francophone player in the NHL. How it worked back in the day, the best French player in the NHL was from the Canadians, but there was confusion. Is it Bossy? Is it Raymond Bourque? Is it Gilbert Perreault? Gilbert Perreault wasn't putting up the numbers, but he was very consistent. The Canada Cup, the injury to Perreault showed the fact that Lafleur and Gretzky could play together, but Lafleur was softing and Gretzky was rising. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they're not going to talk much about this at the funeral. Nobody's going to go up and say, in '81 he almost got killed and he was drinking and he was partying and he was fighting with Grundman and he hated Bob Berry and LaRouche. They're not going to talk about that. It's going to be, the whitewash. But I'm not going to whitewash this. Lafleur was one of my idols, but he's human. That's why I liked him. I got my issues too. I don't like white racists. I don't like the Orange Devil. I don't like the way Americans go on thinking they're better than Canadians. I don't like certain federal politicians in Canada, but you pick your battles, right? Guy Lafleur was trying to work through the press, and that was the same press that was criticizing him through the years. When he scored 60 goals, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people in the Quebec press, and I remember that, will he score 70 next year? And Steve Shutt said it best. He said, when you score 50, do you want 60? That's in Ken Dryden's The Game, talking about how people put the pressure on the Montreal Canadiens. And this is hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen, for the new generation of people, like you're under 35. The Montreal Canadiens were the most studied team by the media in the history of the media. The Red Sox and Yankees are pussies compared to what the Quebec media put the Nordiques in. When new players would show up in Montreal, they were compared to, like a young defenseman, compared to Butch Bouchard, or a new forward compared to Helmer Locke, and a new goalie be compared to Bill Durham and George Hainsworth and George Vezina. They were casting up players from 70 years before and putting all this pressure. Because I think at the time there was like 9 million people in Quebec, or 10 million, and 90% of them read the daily paper, read the weekly paper, watched TV. It was the most media-saturated part of North America. The only thing I can really compare to it now, as hot as college football is right now, and you saw that with the 2 days of the NFL draft on the myriad of American networks last few days, Guy Lafleur was the Reggie Jackson of Quebec. But Reggie Jackson, the media coverage was 5 times as much that Reggie ever got, because Reggie was, the Canadian media was soft on Reggie. You had to, and don't forget the English media in Canada were mimicking, they were covering what the Quebec media was covering for Guy Lafleur. So it was like, it's like ripples in the middle of the rocks in the middle of the stream, and the ripples and all kind of stuff like that. So in 1981, Lafleur almost died. He was given 31 more years on this planet, and he did well with him. He had a great life. He had some problems with his son, of course, for a while, and that all worked out. But dying of cancer and having lung problems as well, heart problems, it happens with the passage of time. So just having an extra 30 years with Guy Lafleur was a blessing, because it was a time where we knew Lafleur was 41 years, excuse me, extra 41 years. We knew a time that Lafleur was going to put in. And in 1984, he came within 2 games of making the Stanley Cup final. So they had enough players that year that could work together. I may have said 31, I meant to say 41. But ladies and gentlemen, 1981 into early 82, one of the strangest years in Guy Lafleur's life. And within a couple of years, with Gretzky winning the cup, nobody cared about the Montreal Canadiens anymore in the media like they cared in 81, 82. It was the last bastion. At the time, it was a failure if the Montreal Canadiens wouldn't win the cup. They were expected to win the cup, just like the Boston Celtics, just like the New York Yankees. But all the Celtic titles and the Yankee titles and the Montreal Canadiens, that all worked together. And the New York media, again, I know what you're probably thinking. It couldn't be that bad. It was worse in Quebec. You had to see the headlines. It was like celebrities. There were celebrities. There were the Kardashians, before the Kardashians, but they did something. They weren't given publicity for not doing anything. They were the Montreal Canadiens. They were gods. We knew their numbers, and we knew their number by their name. There was nobody unknown in Montreal Canadiens. 27 players a year out of 5 billion people on the planet, and everybody knew who they were. Anyway, sometimes they were at the disco too long. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here, we're a Guy Lafleur tribute podcast. Let us know with a like, comment, or subscribe. And don't forget, if you survive an accident in Canada now, they say, "Oh, it's just like Guy Lafleur." I kid you not. It's a rolling kind of a dark comedy gag. Thanks for listening. Bye.